Welcome to Sumbits, where we decode the PowerSchool development experience. Sumbits is brought to you by MBA. Let's start the show.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Sumbits. Joined, as always, with Eric Scheidel and Ryan Cockrum. As you viewers can probably see, we have another Eric joining us. I'm super happy and excited for him to join us. Last couple episodes have just been the three of us, so it's nice to get somebody back on the podcast. Before we get into it, I will say the topic of today is going to be an interesting one. Obviously, we've all dealt with it within school districts and even from the MBA standpoint, but about COVID and what challenges the pandemic has brought upon schools, and especially inside of PowerSchool. And we're going to talk about some of those challenges and kind of how we solve those issues. But before we get too far into it, today I am drinking good old Buffalo Trace. This one
I like
in
that one.
particular. Why is Eric leaving?
I hope we didn't have a power outage. Let's keep talking for, well.
Yeah, we'll just keep talking. This one, hopefully he'll just jump back in. This one in particular is a single barrel select pick from a local liquor store, Bedrock Liquor.
There's one of those.
Yeah, it's awesome. What are you guys drinking today?
Well, oh, there he's coming back. I'm going to call this, just because of the topic at hand today. This is like our COVID nectar. Because let's say, who during this, past 16, 18 months didn't have a little few extra of these,
Indulge a little.
As I decided, the past couple of weeks have been kind of, going a little bit cheaper. And like I said, I do like it, and I wish I had Sean's collection. I decided to try something a little fancier. I really wanted to get something that had the flavor profile woody. And those ones usually were a little pricier, so I decided this time to indulge. And it's an Elijah small batch, just Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey. And I have to say, it is awesome. I really like it. It is smooth. It is sippable. It is just quite delightful.
If you ever get a chance to try their barrel proof, it is quite delicious, as well as their toasted barrel.
Ooh, I like the sound of toasted barrel all around.
Tough to find, but it's delicious.
So
Eric's multiple. What do you guys got?
So before I share what I'm having today, you made me think of something. Ryan, you mentioned that during COVID, people may have indulged a little bit more. Here's a shout out to a good friend, Joe Miller, a country song that I really enjoy. So the country song is all about basically this concept. After COVID started, unlike many others, I actually decided I wasn't going to drink anymore. But I also decided I wasn't going to drink any less. And I didn't have a chance. I apologize to run out today and do anything exciting. So,
hey, whatever.
I just got what's in the fridge, my friends. The old Miller Lite.
Stick with the classics.
Trusty standby.
Summer beer. That's the backyard summer beer.
And for our guest.
So, grab this beast. So, I am having some classic Di Serono, having an amaretto sour.
Nice.
In my giant Yeti.
So I got to ask, what, like a sour mix or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm lazy. I just buy the bottled sour.
Yeah,
mix.
you're talking to the bartender
Easy
here,
enough.
so I mean,
Easy enough. I'm just saying, if you ever get a chance to be a little fancy, you can make your own sour mix. We can chat afterwards.
It is so easy. Sean's never told me, but I found out how to do it. I'm like, whoa.
I gotta say,
it will brighten up your cocktails quite a bit.
Oh yeah.
I've hung out with the Cobby.
The
Whenever any of you run into Sean Cobby at a PSUG conference, we got to get him a bar because he makes some amazing cocktails. The guy has got skills.
Acme.
And that's a good thing because he sure isn't much in the PowerSchool world.
At least I'm good at one thing.
I thought you were going somewhere else.
Fair enough. Well, hey guys, actually, before we get into the topic at hand for our viewers and listeners that don't know Mr. Miletich, is it Miletich?
Miletich.
Titch?
Titch. Yep.
I've been saying it wrong this whole time. Sorry about
Yeah,
that.
me too.
So let us know where you're hailing from. What's your story? What's your PowerSchool story?
I'm in Kalispell, Montana now. My favorite part of my journey was that right out of high school, I went to college for computer science for 2 years. Hated it and dropped out.
Join the crowd.
Hated it. Bounced around food service and retail for the better part of a decade. Fell into a job at the local school district starting out in IT. And a little over a year in, my boss, the previous PowerSchool admin left, and my boss was like, "Hey, Eric, you want to manage PowerSchool?" Yeah, I'm a sucker. Sure. And a little over 6 years later, I'm managing PowerSchool, teaching at events. It's been and love doing the programming side of this. I think it was just one of those things at school. The book learning of programming just didn't make sense to me, and I hated it.
Yeah.
I mean, saying you're a sucker, I mean, Sean and Eric don't help this, but I mean, you're not a sucker because you did meet me at least.
I'm not sure we call that a silver lining, but it's a lining nonetheless.
Can we dig a little deeper into this though? Because I'm curious. You just didn't care for the book learning, but you got into PowerSchool, and now you're all about digging into customizations. What's the difference, man? I mean, you didn't like it in school.
The book learning versus practical, I think, is really what it was. The book learning is very basic, and I was like, I can't do this, this cubicle work. Yeah, and I think it was being able to deal with people and solve problems, and very well could have been the way I was, the way that the program was at this, where I went to college too. That it wasn't geared towards.
The way you're wired to, for sure.
Yeah.
People, I'm a hands-on learner. I'm a practical and reactive learner. I mean, a lot of people are that way, and especially in the world of PowerSchool, it kind of lends itself to that. So
yeah. Yeah, you start off with a problem and you want to find a solution.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm curious too, because that's one thing that's always been a challenge for me. And in the world of PowerSchool, at least when I interact with other developers in the PowerSchool world, they're very sociable people. And you made a comment, Eric, about being stuck in a cubicle. And I know that was really hard for me when I first started, because I did something similar to you, where I went to school for development for information systems analysis, and then I got out into the food service world for about a decade before I decided to bring it back in and get what I call a big kid job.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, I was a bartender too. By the way, I make a much better old fashioned than Sean Coffee does.
Not getting into that.
Well, you know what?
For all of you listeners and viewers, Wisconsin people and their old fashions, they're just, I'm not going to say wrong, but they are wrong.
I'm looking forward to a blind taste test the next time we're all three together, because I love an old fashioned, and it'll be cool that you guys both make your own variation.
Well,
put it down in front of
way
me.
different than mine, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah,
well, that's fine. But
will
I
be
won't know
different.
who's who if we do it blind.
But
right.
So to bring that back around, the point I was trying to make, Eric, is, and what I see in a lot of the PowerSchool world with developers, there's the stereotype of a programmer, of the propeller head, the inability to function in social situations, and it was anxiety provoking to me, because I love developing, but I also couldn't be stuck in a cave staring at a computer screen for 8 hours a day. I'd rather find a job where I can drink beer and record a podcast.
It only took 10 years, but you finally got it.
So, I mean, was that part of your experience then? Like, you realized I can do this and still interact with human beings?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was the big piece of it, because, and part of it too was because I came in entry level outside of PowerSchool, just doing, basic break fix and work my way in. And so it made sense to where, I was already kind of out, boots on the ground doing, working with, all the staff.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, I mean,
you'd already seen these problems, and now you were finally in a position where you could actually help find a solution.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
we're
if
we're
you've
glad
heard
you
our
made your way to our world, man.
Absolutely.
yeah, well, and you've heard our if you listen to our podcast, for sure me and Sean exact same kind of background into it, and that's it. Like, for me, for sure, entry level into my school district, and then came along PowerSchool, and then ultimately now I'm here. But now
Well,
I feel
speaking of seeing problems and wanting to find solutions, COVID made us all think a little creatively, right? Especially there was a lot of things based around attendance, and every state was a little bit different, but I'd say it's pretty common across the country and probably around the world, where what schools did and what schools look like was different than anything we had seen before. So, Eric, I'm going to start with you just because you are the one that's working in a district right now. What kind of problems did you see arise with COVID, and that'll lead to kind of the solutions too. But
well, obviously, so contact tracing, number one.
Yeah.
And then I'd say, outside of that too, we didn't deal with it much, but I know lots of districts had a lot of unique hybrid schedules.
Yeah.
Where they came back part-time or, had very unique schedules and trying to provide the attendance tools to manage that.
Yeah, I think one thing that we had kind of discussed in a previous podcast, previous episode, was the way the PowerSchool community really came together and decided that we were going to leverage this piece in PowerSchool that I didn't personally know of anybody that was using this piece inside of PowerSchool until COVID happened, but tracks, right?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, hey, this is a perfect use for this, whether that was what it was created for or not. But did you guys leverage tracks?
We did not, because we came back full time the whole year, but I know a ton of districts that utilize tracks. Realistic in the past, prior to COVID, I think the only districts that I was aware of were kind of unique, maybe magnet schools, charter schools, those kind of things that had, unique hybrid schedules to begin with that would have utilized that kind of thing. Outside of that, I didn't know anybody that used tracks until COVID, but a ton of districts used it.
So interestingly, I did leverage tracks in my old district, when I was at a district for kindergarten situations, for various half day. Yeah, AM, PM, and then we had one school because it was so small in one of my district was a very rural one, 40 kids total. The K to 3 class, and then you had a 4 to 8 class. Wow. So the kindergartners there were at one point still doing alternating days, and they said, well, let's make them full days because it's so hard to do some of these projects, and the parents were like, yeah
please
so
take them all
we don't
day.
have to do half days. So anyways, they I'd have different kindergarten schedules and different grade 0 to deal with, so tracks.
Yeah, great use for it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I do want to say that you mentioned the contact tracing, and I remember how much of a hot topic that was at the beginning. And I mean, obviously it was still important, still being used all throughout, but I mean, I don't remember a lot of chatter about it anymore down the road. So I mean, it's interesting how it was definitely a thing, and you still needed to do it, but it definitely, I don't know if your schools are like my schools, wasn't as like they looked at the schools, and the schools were handling things pretty well just with the social distancing.
Yeah. And I'd say it's a combination of all the districts I talked to throughout. With contact tracing, it was a combination of, there was the, oh crap, how do we do this? To start the school year, the first time, your first case, and you have to contact trace. How do you do this? So working through, trial and error of figuring out how it works. And then I think slowly for a lot of districts, as cases, dropped, case counts dropped off. I think that, helped alleviate some of the stress of it too. But yeah, to start the year, there was no easy answer, no simple solution. It had to be, it was a process.
Yeah. So what was your solution for that?
So our district, we utilized going into the sub portal and doing using the seating charts.
Okay.
To be able to, and then in combination with pulling attendance reports, and then within I don't know, within a month or so, MBA had released the COVID contact tracing report, and then a couple other people had released similar basic attendance tracking, but we still, because of social distancing, kind of spacing and figuring out, they still had to look at seating charts.
Yeah.
To figure out where, instead of sending the whole classroom, you had to think about, who was within 6 feet. And
Right.
even that wasn't
granular.
Well, it was even
I
that,
remember
send the
this.
whole-
Yeah.
yeah, you if you don't utilize that, you would basically go, well, I'm sending the whole class, in quarantine.
Thought of that. Wow. So
No, I remember because the NBA COVID contact tracing report fell on me, and I thought it was pretty neat. We put it out there, and
Yeah.
I was proud that that NBA wanted to put it out there for free, and then the feedback starts coming in, and
It would be nice,
The
yeah.
report was really all about who was in the same room with this kid.
Yeah.
And the feedback started coming in, and they said, "Well, we need to know who was within 6 feet of this kid."
Yeah.
And I'm like, I have no idea how to pull that out of
Yikes.
your database, man. I'm
Yeah.
Well, and that's-
sorry.
Unfortunately,
ultimately-
seating charts don't show you the number of feet in between the pictures.
No, so like what we had to do is, so our principals went through and printed off a copy of everybody's seating chart. And in the past we had teachers that never used seating charts, so they made them all use seating charts. And then they went out and, at least did some basic measurements of figuring out, because every classroom is different.
Yeah.
Depending on the class size, there's, and, the classroom space and how, things were oriented. It could be, 3 kids, it could be 7 kids, if you had tables, all those kind of, tables versus desks. And
for a scope, just for us to know, then, how many principals, how many teachers, and whatever was involved, how big is your district?
6,000 students.
Wow, so that's significant.
It's pretty big.
That's a lot of people to deal with for seating charts and everything. Wow.
Right.
Yeah, well, then especially you go middle school, high school, where kids are rotating.
Yeah. That's
So
all.
did you guys take into
I just want to say,
account
just
actual?
all this terrible. That's awesome that you guys came up with that solution.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was there any consideration to the kids walking through the hallway, or was that just not enough time of contact to be concerned about?
So what most of our schools did was did kind of layered release.
Okay.
So it's a limit the number of kids in the hallway. Layered release, limited times at lockers, so that wasn't like, every period, in between every period they were at a locker, all those kind of things.
Yeah.
And for the high school just behind me up the street here, it's like I don't know if it's grade level or by last name, but it's like grade 9s were allowed to use the east door, grade 10s use the south door, grade 11s use the north door. Like, I mean, they would do as much as they can to really limit the inflow and density of the students, the mass coming in.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they had assigned seating at lunch and, all those kind of things.
Ours for a bit weren't even allowed to stay at school for lunch. They had to go home. So, and that's great
Wow.
if you live close by, but if you didn't live close by, you're wandering the neighborhood, unfortunately.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
crazy. So just out of curiosity, it sounds like you guys did go in pretty granular as far as contact tracing and things like that. Was there just out of curiosity, just because I don't know, this isn't something that I've heard anybody doing, but did you guys make any type of like scheduling changes? Did you leverage any tools with like groups and constraints and whatnot inside, like say PowerScheduler, to keep groups together at all?
And before you answer that, I just want to say anybody else who wants to share their stories that
Yeah, I'd
are
love to hear.
different from this, please throw it in the comments because I mean this is fascinating just from Eric here. I definitely want to hear all the different things that weren't publicly known. I want to hear people's creative solutions because it's really cool.
Yeah, for sure.
So like at our middle school, we always have used Teams to kind of keep limit the number of kind of keep the kids in a small group, kind of kind of as a concept of baby stepping them from the elementary world where you're with the same 20 to 30 kids all day every day, to high school where you're have 7 periods and 7 different groups of kids for the most part.
Right.
At the high schools, they did a little bit, but not much. It was just kind of keeping things normal as far as their scheduling went.
Interesting.
One of the big things I'm curious about, just especially because you guys had the unique approach there with the attendance, is we've talked about at the beginning of the year, like this current school year, how you had to deal with things. But of course, we know that this actually started a year and a half ago, right? And I'm assuming you had to shut down for a period of time there. Yeah.
So we were full remote the rest of the school year, previous year.
Okay. So how did you shuffle to deal with that? How was that approach even handled? From your side, from the data side. Obviously we've heard a lot about how the teacher side, but from the data side and the management side, and what was said, hey, Eric, we need to get it so that these teachers can record their grades, but we need to make sure that we deal with it like this. So what approaches did you have to come up with?
There wasn't a lot on the PowerSchool directly on the PowerSchool side. There was a lot of, I would say, the connections to, new solutions or helping people get set up with, for us, we're a Google district. So a ton of Google Classroom of helping people get their classes in that, not every teacher was using Google Classroom, last year or would have been in 2020 prior to, COVID. And so then all of a sudden it was, well, you're remote, you're using Google Classroom. So there was a lot of that. There was finding some solutions to help teachers move their grades or scores from Classroom into PowerSchool.
Yeah. And I think it's pretty on the nose to say teachers that are newer into the game probably had an easier time than teachers who had been at it for a long time, and that was probably a training situation, or
a little bit of both. But it was more we looked out and had at least some we'll call them classroom experts at most of our schools, to where at least they could kind of peer-to-peer help each other.
Good.
But yeah, you still to stereotype and say like you said, that just because they're a veteran teacher that maybe they struggle with technology.
I didn't want to put it that way, but yeah, I know it could be totally sound
because you get new teachers out of college that sometimes struggle with technology too.
And I experienced it. So you're right, 100%.
For sure.
That's even a big piece of the whole the whole COVID experience was having staff dealing with new technology and things, new curriculum tools, especially during that remote period of
How about training that staff when you at this time, I'm assuming, were remote? Yes.
No, we were only remote for like maybe a week or two, and then we were back we were the only people back in the office. But we gave the case that we were by ourselves, and it was more functional for us to kind of have our access to our full command centers instead of working off of a laptop.
You advocated for that then?
Yeah.
Okay. But
in your position,
the people that you had to train
were remote.
Yeah, you can't just go to a school, I guess, now, though, either way, still, though, right?
Well, so most of us actually have our offices on a campus.
But teachers
weren't there. Correct.
There you go. So
yeah, you had the onesie twosie teachers that were on campus because they had limited to no internet at home. They might live way out rural or something and didn't have access, so they needed to come in to work for that purpose. But yeah, the vast majority of your staff were remote. A lot of virtual meetings like this.
Yeah. So you said you
Screen
We all got
sharing.
used to wearing collared shirts with sweatpants.
Yep.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah. Or just underwear, whatever.
You're wearing
Yeah.
pants?
Exactly.
I'm not wearing pants. I'm wearing shorts.
So Eric, I know.
No, but
I know a lot
my question there then, Eric, is I'm assuming you had to train your teaching staff prior to COVID when you could meet with them face to face. Were you training them still in a remote fashion at that point? Did that change when COVID hit and the teachers were remote, and did that present challenges in terms?
Absolutely. There was, because large majority of our trainings prior to were all in person, training events. And then having to go remote, it was definitely challenging, because they were remote, some of which, weren't super familiar with doing a virtual call, doing a video meeting, and, how do I screen share, how do I
How do
get
I
into a
not make
Google Meet or a
myself a
Zoom?
cat?
You know what? And interestingly,
Yeah.
so I got firsthand experience. Now that I think about it, at a teacher who is brand new to the game. So my son, who's in kindergarten this past year, his teacher was on maternity leave for the first 2/3 of his school year, and then at the end of last year for whenever she was around. So this was all new to her when she came back. So things were open when she came off mat leave, but then Canada had a third wave. Manitoba specifically shut down, and all of a sudden everything was remote for the latter half of May and all the rest of June. And she was doing the Teams calls, but she had, because for parents who work essential services with students, their kids would still go to school. But for, like, in my situation, we were able to have our kid at home. It was a half and half kind of approach. So she's trying to do Teams while having kids in her classroom. And I remember the first couple days, it was funny actually, because I'm sitting down here doing whatever my job here, and I hear upstairs a bunch of kids, including my son, going, "Madam Anna, we can't see the board. We can't see the board." Because what had happened was she'd accidentally muted herself, but the camera was, like, I don't know, way too far back. But she's up at the front of this room on the whiteboard talking to the kids in the front of the classroom. She can't hear anything coming from the computer because, again, muted. And yeah, so I mean, there you go, definite challenge there. And and I mean, she's definitely young to know technology, but not just because you're young means you're an expert in technology, of course. But yeah, it's a whole new experience.
Absolutely. And you take that a step further and you talk about the people that were out, say, maternity leave or just sick leave, or if they were quarantine teachers, and the substitutes, and then your limited substitute pool, whether it be, people, concerned about, COVID, or they were able to get better paying jobs because they were, able to go in, to other places and replace,
Mm-hmm.
displaced workers, all those things that went on. And so, and also the kind of uniqueness, of trying to maybe teachers that were just quarantined but felt fine, of, having them remote teach, so we did a bit of that where we had teachers that were, quarantined because of COVID, but had no symptoms, were able to, fully work all day, but they just worked from home and would just basically, video call into class, and they would just be a substitute in class to, take attendance and be an adult in the room while the teacher was still teaching.
It's crazy.
That is.
So one thing I know a lot of people dealt with, because obviously the states started wanting to have more information based around COVID. Did Montana do like any big reporting changes for state reporting? For instance, I know Indiana, they basically wanted to have a separate present code for in person than it was for virtual. Obviously based around funding and all that fun stuff. So I know Indiana districts, and they eventually had some guidance for PowerSchool districts in Indiana, but we all know how that, there's usually a time period before there's guidance of people scrambling around trying to find their own solutions. You guys have anything like that in Montana?
We lucked out and didn't have to change much on the state reporting side of things.
Gotcha.
But I know, like you said, I know quite a few people that did, in other states. They basically, the only thing that they wanted us to track was full in person versus hybrid versus remote.
Gotcha. And how did you guys track
and just
that?
to the student, not to the day. It was just kind of, your student count of, if you were a full in-person student, a hybrid student, or a full remote student.
So it wasn't attached to attendance at all. It was just kind of a student field.
Yeah, just a student field.
Interesting.
Do you know where that information was going? Like who was using that to figure out what? Or I don't think you do, but I'm just curious anyways.
It's state reporting. We never know.
Yeah, that's
Well,
what I was about to say.
I mean, I know the reality of it, but I'm just curious to know what they were trying to get at, but I don't expect you to know.
Yeah, the state. That was.
No, I
would
get
assume it was just some basic analytics to know, maybe just to know what amount of student, like percentage of students were coming to school full time versus hybrid versus full remote.
Yeah.
Well,
So
and what's the performance of those students? I think that's huge. I mean,
It is.
how awesome is it that we can learn from anywhere in the world, or we can work from anywhere in the world? And what's the impact on performance, whether you're a student or an employee, of learning or working remotely? I would imagine that's a big part of what our governments want to try to determine
Well,
during this
and
pandemic.
I mean, I know from a lot of people, like, I mean, family, like, in-laws and, siblings and whatnot, like the biggest, this is a bit of a tangent here, but everyone prior to this, wants to, tentatively explore the idea of remote employment, but everyone's scared to actually jump in and find out for, fear of the worst case scenarios.
Right.
COVID kind of took that option away from you and made you have to jump in, right? Like, so you had to find out one way or the other. And I mean, in the nature of what I'm doing, I've been remote since way before COVID, right? I can't work for a US company if I live in Canada if I can't do it remotely. But for other folks, it's I know of offices that are saying, hey, we're going to sell this office and downsize because it turns out it works.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I mean, not the case for everybody. In some cases, it works better. And then translating to students, it probably worked better for some students. I'm not saying it worked better for all students. I know it can't work better for all students because every kid's different. Every person's different. Yep. But it definitely probably lends itself to it lends itself though to the idea that everyone really is different. You can't paint every kid with the same brush. And I'm a huge advocate of kids being unique. You can't just put all kids in the same box and say they all got to learn the same way. And if anything good could have come out of all of this in the past year, maybe it's that those kids that struggled in the traditional school environment, maybe it's put a little spotlight on the fact that maybe they could excel in a different way. Yeah. That's a little unorthodox, but hey, it worked, so let's keep it.
Absolutely. Yeah. We saw that there were kids that, struggled in person that really excelled remotely. You had kids that were, excelled in person and struggled remotely, and everything in between. It's like I said, every kid is different. And it's definitely, it was a good learning experience from a school district perspective, for that.
For sure.
That's interesting. So something you said, in particular, the kids that struggled in person but excelled remotely. I guess I hadn't thought about it from that perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I'd always considered it more from the perspective of the kid that excelled in person. I always thought for those kids that were really enjoyed school, were good at school, and maybe they were held back by the pace of the rest of the class in a remote learning environment. Maybe I can now go at my own pace. You know what I'm saying? But I hadn't
Oh, I know what you're
considered,
saying.
I hadn't considered the possibility that someone could struggle in person and excel remotely. That's an interesting concept.
I mean,
Well, and
we've
some
all
some of it's
anxiety.
that
Sorry,
they're
we've talked about anxiety in the past. Whatever. I mean, that's a perfect thing right there. Anxiety of in classroom, whether you're just talking about test anxiety or social anxiety and things like that, things that will distract you from the task at hand. But now you're at home in your comfort zone, and you have control of your environment, and now all that you have is what you're looking at, what you're working on, and your creature comforts. Like, I mean, it's a big thing, huge thing.
yeah,
So
it wasn't that they were, not smart or anything like that when they struggled in person. It was the environment just wasn't setting them up for success, for that particular kid.
yeah, I mean, and again, I mean, I'm not trying to stand on a soapbox here, but every kid's got potential, like, really, no matter what. It's there's just so many factors that that come into play, and I mean, it's just a matter of figuring out what the hack is, and I mean that almost literally, what the hack is to help that kid figure out how to benefit and thrive the best, right?
Sure.
And like I said, so I mean, this being the central topic of COVID and challenges in retrospective, I hope that there is a silver lining maybe to it, that this has helped different. Like, I hope someone can analyze the data at some point, just like you're saying, Eric. Like, what are the hybrid learners and how did they perform? And then what about the kids that were fully in class? And what do we know about those kids from the past 5 years? And what are we going to watch from them for the next 5 years? And what can we do to integrate what we've learned into their experience?
Yeah, and I'm going to take that as an opportunity to segue back into, what things we can do in PowerSchool. Obviously, when we're looking at metrics for student success, grades aren't everything. Attendance isn't everything. Log entries isn't everything. But those are certain pieces that we do track within PowerSchool. As someone that lives in the data, all four of us have either been in that position or are still doing it. Maybe it's nothing that we've done yet, but I'd love to, start a conversation of some ideas of what districts and our listeners, where can we look at some of that data and how can we compare and what kind of reports can we make? That way we can leverage those attendance codes or that state reporting code that says they were fully in person or fully remote or a hybrid. Use that data, compare it to previous COVID. And maybe that's the real key to what we can get out of this, is really seeing how those students changed, through COVID, whether, all of a sudden a C student was getting A's through COVID because they were in a remote setting.
Awesome.
Well, and I think, yeah, and I think a lot of that's pretty, fairly simple if you had the reports to begin with. Like you said, for our, standpoint, it was a simple student field that was added. And so it was, well, you add that field to the report and you can do more, do analytics based off of that, and, maybe even dive into historical data.
Yeah.
Other districts that maybe, like I said, where Indiana, where there was a lot of, attendance, you have to get a little bit more creative where they're looking at the attendance side of it. But utilizing those, those data points just to analyze the data, I think is going to be huge.
I mean, Eric, does that, Eric Scheidel, for someone that develops solutions for people, where does your mind go when I mention that?
My mind is the hamster's running right now. I'm not going to lie. It's all over the place because so much of my life is people telling me this is how we want to analyze the data.
Yeah.
But I also like to step back and think about the logic of analyzing the data in such a way. And, when we talk about, you brought up, 3 key points there. You brought up discipline, you brought up attendance, you brought up grades, right? And that's how I think we typically identify at-risk students, right? But
And it's imperfect, but
It is.
it is imperfect, and that's the thing, is we have to use this data to identify trends, but then we also have to step back and think about the things, the metadata, I think, if you will, right? So you start talking about,
you could almost
what's that?
call it substandards. Like and I don't mean that it's
Sure.
substandard, but you got your standards, and then you have your substandards, the different things that make up those.
Yeah.
Let's get granular.
Yeah, so I'm thinking about, how do these different things factor in? Like, for example, if a student is learning remotely, and we start looking at the data of their attendance, I'm thinking, well, is the attendance data as reliable in what actually happened in the physical world if a student is remote as if the student is on site? Am I making sense? You know what I'm talking about?
Absolutely, you're
And
preaching.
that's going to differ per district, unfortunately.
Well,
And I would even say, take it a step further, it's per teacher.
Yeah.
And how they manage attendance, and how they manage their remote class.
Well, and from that, like, to me, it's all about, everything's about the kid. Like I said, every kid's unique. Like, just because I took that, and maybe I took that my way without looking at your way, and so correct me, but like, to me, it's like, just because you're in class doesn't mean you're learning, and just because you're out of class doesn't mean you're not learning.
Right.
Because every kid is different. Every kid does it a different way. Every kid feels a different way. Every kid expresses a different way. And I mean, that's huge. Like, there's so many different factors that affect different people. I mean, I won't say kids, because kids are people. People are people. Whether you're a child or you're an adult, you have feelings and you have anxieties, you have everything. So everything affects you in a different way.
Yeah, and as a guy that works, just my job is to work with data and try to take that data and aggregate it in a way that provides information to people that allows them to make decisions that hopefully at the end of the day is going to make a child's education a better education. But man, it's tough when you start talking about data, right? Because it's all just ones and zeros in a computer somewhere, and it can be meaningful. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying we got to throw it out the window. It's pointless.
Oh, no, not at all. It is helpful.
But yeah, again, when you start getting down to that metadata, I think you really need a human brain behind it to think about, well, what does this really mean?
Yep.
And, when you talk about data, I remember one of the first things that I learned when I took statistics in college is don't believe statistics. Because if the statistician wants you to believe something, they will choose the appropriate data points to make their point.
Yes, and they'll
valid.
present the graph, the chart from the base to the height the way they want it. You're right. But that doesn't, exactly what you're saying, that doesn't make that data irrelevant to be thrown out. All data is helpful. All data is helpful. You just need to, the key is objectivity. Everything has to be objective. You have to look at it that way. You can't be too invested when you're going into it, or at least if you are, make sure you have a peer that's looking at it from the objective standpoint to kind of like cancel you out when you want to go on a tangent of going, oh, see, like you need that. And I mean, I'm very much like that. I'm not somebody, I mean, I have my own strong beliefs and opinions, not denying that, but I mean, I strive to look at things from the outside, and if I can't, I like to hear other people out. So, I mean,
I think that
I love
the main
this
reason
conversation.
I think the main reason I bring it up is, just so our viewers can, look at PowerSchool as a tool through this. That even though ideally this episode was going to be about what challenges did we see and what solutions did we come up through COVID, but I feel like now we're getting into the conversation of, now we are maybe at the tail end, maybe we can see the other side of this, being able to use that data inside of PowerSchool to make some informed decisions about how your school's running and how your teachers are doing things. And I think it could be really useful.
And I don't want to say, like, I mean, I don't want to shortchange staff and teachers. Teachers are amazing. Teachers work their asses off. My parents were teachers. Both my parents were teachers. And I used to work in a district. The hardest in the school system that all this was on the kids. I don't care if you want to disagree with that. I'm going to fight you on it. Like, I mean, for even the kids that are boxed into a learning situation that wasn't ideal for them pre-pandemic, that we're still going through, is still a routine. It was still something that they at least could align to and be used to. Boy, did this throw everything off kilter. Like, yeah.
I'm not going to disagree with you, but I do think that kids are probably a little more flexible than the teacher.
I'm going to fight you on that
for 30 years.
Yeah, no, but I mean, nonetheless, I mean, I'm not saying it wasn't hard on teachers. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. Like, this was hard on teachers. This was hard on everybody involved. This was hard outside of the education system. But I feel like for kids, just, it's such a different way to learn one way or the other. Like, I mean, like we were saying earlier on, my neighbor across the street, his oldest daughter, she's a smart cookie. She's, great in school. She hated the remote situation because she found it easier to be able to ask her teacher things.
Yeah.
When she was in classroom. And I mean, that's the other side. That's contrary to how I was as a student.
Yeah. I have a really good friend of mine that has a boy. He was in 6th or 7th grade last year. And very similarly, he was straight A student, very good student. And then remote learning happened, and he was too easily distracted by things at home, where he needed that structure of a classroom.
Yep.
So yeah, it's all over the place.
Ultimately, there's no, like everything in any aspect of life, there's no perfect rule and there's no perfect situation for everything.
Exactly.
Unfortunately.
There you go, Sean. I'm sorry, like what you just said so resonated with me. It's the metadata that we don't see in the data, because we want to get, like, is this kid remote? Is this kid remote? How are they performing? How are they performing? But the metadata, the stuff that we don't see in, well, this kid's remote and this kid's remote, but this kid has been set up by his or her family.
This kid went boo, and this kid went boo.
Yeah. Well, that's where the historical data matters,
right?
This
kid had their Nintendo Switch right next to him at their desk, and this kid, was in a different environment, in a home learning environment. Yeah. There's just so much, and again,
well, that's a whole other
not
side.
Arguing that we shouldn't analyze the data, but we should do it with
the knowledge that there's more,
the big picture in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, like I said, every kid's home life is different and unique, and that affects their home learning, way more even so than what it does in a school setting, because the school kind of, for the most part, is routine and structured.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Just you know what? I mean, not to minify everything, but what a crazy damned year. Holy Nikes.
I mean, most of us are just pretending it didn't happen, right? 2020 didn't happen. Man. We're just gonna move on and hope for the better next year.
What was the best reference I heard was something about 2020 being a dumpster fire inside a train wreck.
Dumpster fire is my favorite part. Yeah.
A dumpster fire inside a train wreck. Yes.
Did you guys? So you know how you can get those Yule log videos?
I know what you're talking about.
Did you see the 2020 dumpster fire?
Yeah.
I mean, so I think my mother-in-law was over at one point because we were a little more open at that point, but we threw it on the TV because why not? And it's like, it's basically just a garbage dumpster, and they're burning stuff in it, and every 10 minutes they'd throw something very symbolic to the pandemic in. So at one point it was like a couple rolls of toilet paper, and then it was like your suit, and then a briefcase, because it's all the things you just don't need anymore, or that people are going crazy for, sanitizer, like It was
Okay, I'm sorry. This has nothing to do with PowerSchool, but toilet paper, like, I did not get that. How is it a pandemic strikes and there's a toilet paper shortage? I'm going, you know what, man? Like, that's the least of my worries. I got a detachable shower head. I can figure this out. But
Hey,
here's the thing.
bidet sales went up.
You live on your own, so that's definitely a big thing there that made it easier for you. And my household, we didn't go crazy and hoard toilet paper, and we actually didn't suffer at all. But it was interesting going through like the stores and seeing nothing on those shelves.
Crazy, right?
That was something else.
Yeah. Well, hey guys, before we wrap up, I do want to ask one more question from Eric, the guy that's actually working in a district. You know, as we've kind of, like I said, we're not on the other side yet. We're still lingering towards the end. Hopefully, it's going to be soon where we can, you know, look at this all in the past. But is there anything within PowerSchool specifically that you've kind of taken out of COVID that you're going to be carrying through forward?
Good question.
Um,
That's a question to all our commenters too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then email us. You comment down below or email us at Sumbits at NBA-link. Love to
Don't
hear.
forget to smash that like and subscribe.
Yeah. And put our faces on yourself.
Yeah, I would say, you know, one of the big ones is providing the end user reporting even more than ever, because they're remote, you know, because they're remote or not, you know, not around, you know, not maybe interacting as much as they used to.
They're not coming to your office and knocking on your door.
No,
I'm not gonna do.
I'd say, you know, that would be one of the big ones. There was also, you know, things like unique ways to find, you know, to get data, because there were more data points, you know, kind of, you know, being needed. You know, things like the, you know, how do I do contact tracing, you know, with the, you know, the substitute login seating chart.
Definitely forces you to think about PowerSchool a little bit more creatively.
And that's the strength of it to me too. Like,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
no matter what, and that's why even like, I'm not gonna lie, folks, when I asked for you to tell me your cool solutions and things you came up with or outside of the box and put them in the comments, I am genuinely interested to see them because they are cool. But it's not just because I think they're cool. I always look at things and going, how can I apply that somewhere else?
Exactly.
So, you know, I'm not trying to steal people's work at all. So, I mean, I'm not like saying post your code. I do like to hear your ideas though, and going, oh, cool.
Right.
How can I use that? I mean, that's all of PowerSchool to me. That's all development for me. It's like, that's a neat idea. How can I use it somewhere else?
Absolutely.
You know,
And that to
probably
me
one of the other
is-
big ones that came out of COVID too would be I'd say a lot more integrations with software vendors and different, you know, educational products.
Yeah.
Out of necessity.
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure.
I just want to say I think that's one of the wonderful things about PowerSchool, and I'm biased for two reasons. A, I have made my living working with PowerSchool, and I don't know any other student information systems. And B, I'm a developer, but gosh, I mean, the fact that it's customizable, the fact that Eric Miletich.
Pitch. Yep.
What's
We all learned something.
You're like,
if I
where's
need,
Miletich
if
from?
what's that?
I'm just curious now. Where's Miletich from?
It's Croatian.
Croatian.
Oh,
Okay,
wow.
cool.
So my point though is, if I need this feature, I can build it into PowerSchool. How cool is that?
Yeah,
I mean, I don't need to find a third-party system to integrate if I can write a good query, if I've got SQL reports. Hi, Matt friend, I hope you're listening. You know, if whatever, if I've got
Friendly.
the skills, if I've got I can just get this. I can make it available to my end users.
Or the contacts.
That's the thing that I've always loved about PowerSchool. Every software system is going to have its drawbacks and its benefits, but the fact that we can make it do what we want it to do. You know, I've always told people, like, you know what? The great thing about it is if you decide that I need a way for my teachers to share banana bread recipes, I can build that for you.
Figure it
Okay.
out.
The best thing about PowerSchool is it's so customizable, and the worst thing about PowerSchool is it's so customizable.
Right?
That is perfect way to end it. Eric, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you
Absolutely.
for watching all of our listeners and viewers. Cheers to everyone. This skewed a little way away from PowerSchool, but I still think it was a great conversation. Hope you all got something out of it. Let us know. Sumbits at NBA-link. Wear our faces on your body. Swag links down below. Let us know. Cheers, everyone. Take care.
Goodbye.
Thanks for joining us, and a special thanks to our subscribers. Consider becoming one today. Enjoy more episodes and learn more at mba-link.com.